Lord, thank you for this opportunity to gather as sons and daughters. Thank you for celebrating your movement in people's lives. Thank you for an altar filled with young people, the next generation. And thank you for a church body who sees the value of investing in them. Thank you for parents that know the value of getting their children involved. So for the parents that are driving back and forth and dropping them off at rehearsals and bringing them to programs and making sure they're logged in, God, we thank you for that. For those that are watching online on our eCampus throughout the country, we thank you for each one. Lord, as always, we have issues in our life that we need speaking to. We need encouragement. Some of us need salvation. Some of us need commitment to a church. And some of us, God, just need to know it's going to be all right. Whatever is going on in our life, would you, by your Spirit now, speak out of your word? Would you heal and deliver according to that word? And would you save for your name's sake? Speak, Lord. We're listening. In Jesus' name, amen. Hallelujah. If you remain standing and turn with me to Acts chapter 27. This will be my final sermon in Rethinking Church. We'll begin our Advent Christmas season messages next Sunday. I want to just spend time here in Acts 27, beginning at the 9th verse. Acts chapter 27 and verse number 9. I'm reading from the English Standard Version of the text. Since much time had passed and the voyage was now dangerous because even the fast was already over, Paul advised them, saying, "Sirs, I perceive that the voyage will be with injury and much loss, not only of the cargo in the ship, but also of our lives." But the centurion paid more attention to the pilot and to the owner of the ship than to what Paul said, because the harbor was not suitable to spend the winter in. The majority decided to put out to sea from there on the chance that somehow they could reach Phoenix, a harbor of Crete facing both southwest and northwest, and spend the winter there. Verse 13. Now when the south wind blew gently, supposing that they had obtained their purpose, they weighed anchor, sailed along Crete close to the shore. But soon a tempestuous wind called the northeaster struck down from the land. When the ship was caught and could not face the wind, we gave way to it and were driven along. Running under the lee of a small island called Cauda, we managed with difficulty to secure the ship's boat. After hoisting it up, they used supports to undergird the ship. Then, fearing that they would run aground on the Syrtis, they lowered the gear, and thus they were driven along. Since we were violently storm-tossed, they began the next day to jettison the cargo. And on the third day, they threw the ship's tackle overboard with their own hands. When neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, and no small tempest lay on us, all hope of our being saved was at last abandoned. Since they had been without food for a long time, Paul stood among them and said, "Men, you should have listened to me and not have set sail from Crete and incurred this injury and loss. Yet now I urge you to take heart, for there will be no loss of life among you, but only of the ship. For this very night there stood before me an angel of the God to whom I belong and whom I worship. And he said, 'Do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand before Caesar. And behold, God has granted you all of those who sail with you. So take heart, men, for I have faith in God that it will be exactly as I have been told. But we must run aground on some island.'" Say amen if you can. Before you take your seat, look at somebody. I want you to give them this message. Look at somebody. Tell them, neighbor, you will overcome that storm. Amen. Amen. You can have your seat in the presence of the Lord today. Everybody say overcoming storms. If you're online, type that in, overcoming storms. I have been leading us as a congregation to rethink church, to recognize that it is much more than walls in a building, but to also recognize that sometimes we want the good attached to something and are not willing to endure the struggle that comes with it. And as we have been rethinking church, I'm seeing through the story of the acts of the Holy Spirit in the life of the church in the book of Acts that there were bunches of storms they had to endure. And I got to thinking about us as a church, 2021, that all of us have these dreams, these goals, these things that we want God to do in our life. But the truth of the matter is the going gets rough. I mean, can we be really honest that if it's really worth having and worth doing, it's going to take a struggle? And I think where we have to work at stuff is recognizing that storms are a part of what comes with this journey. And yet we cannot lose heart in the midst of the storm, but we have to believe God as we go through the storm. Something has hit me. One of the things that's hit me is, John, no victory you have or I have is going to be a lasting victory if we don't know how to survive storms and crisis. That's the thing that's hit me. That even when I have my days of victory, my days of winning, my days of overcoming, I'm still going to wake up and have that crisis or that storm hit in my life. And if I, as a believer, don't know how to navigate that storm experience, if I don't know how to overcome storms, if I don't know how to put my theology into practice, because if you notice in chapter 27 here, Paul is he's over and done the theology. He's over and done the doctrine. He's over and done the lecture. Paul is saying now it's laboratory time. Now it's living time. I know you've been worshiping, and I know you've been reading the scriptures, and I know you've been coming to church, and I know you know the word, but now life is coming at you. And when life comes at you, you got to put in use what you've been learning. And let me tell you what the culprit is. I just have 3 very practical things to say to us. Let me tell you the culprit. And young people, this is a great word. I want you to hear this from your pastor. The culprit here is impatience. They're not in a storm because they're out of God's will. They are not in a storm because he necessarily did anything wrong. They're in a storm because they wouldn't wait for the storm to pass. They're in a storm because they won't wait on God's leadership. As a matter of fact, at least Paul has got enough nerve to say, I told y'all. You're going to listen to somebody else and not me. And because you just had to set sail and you couldn't wait for this thing to pass, now we find ourselves because of impatience. Maybe on this Next Generation Sunday, maybe I have a handful of adults that could use the journey of their own life as a way of encouraging our young people to let them know you can get in a lot of trouble when you're impatient. Now, I'm here to tell y'all, look at somebody, tell them, be patient. Can I speak this over somebody's life? Be patient, the right opportunity is coming. Be patient, the right man or the right woman is coming. Sometimes we get so desperate that we have to move, that we wind up moving in impatience and not waiting on God's leadership. And as a result of that, I find myself in a storm. Today, I want to give us storm surviving skills. Storm surviving skills. It's 3 of them I see in the text. They really are kind of loaded, though, because it's kind of point on point. But here's the first storm surviving skill. The first storm surviving skill is that I need to filter, everybody say filter. I need to filter the advice that's being offered me. Let me just park here for a moment. The text opens up as I begin reading, where there is a dialogue, and Paul is basically saying, look, this is not the best time for us to move. But the Bible says that the centurion paid more attention. Everybody say more attention. Good, I feel the Holy Ghost. More attention to the pilot and to the owner of the ship than to what Paul said. Do you know how much trouble we get in because we pay the wrong attention? That sometimes I'm paying attention to the wrong advice, and we've got to park for a moment and recognize that not everybody has earned the right to speak into our lives. Not everybody has earned the right to give you advice. Boy, I wish I had a praying church here. Not everybody has the right to give you advice, to tell you what to do. And sometimes we get in trouble because we listen to the wrong experts. I'm learning, y'all. I'm learning, man. I need some advice from some folk that's been where I'm trying to go. I need some advice from people that have made mistakes along the way, and they recognize because of their experience and because of their journey. And one of the most valuable things we can do as believers is filter the advice we're given, because sometimes folk don't want to see you succeed. Sometimes folk don't want to see you excel. Sometimes folk don't. And we get in trouble, y'all, because the opposite part is true, that we don't want to take advice from nobody. See, can I hang out here for just a moment? Because built into this filtering the advice is I need to just be careful who I get on in the boat with. See, because Paul is, now he's a prisoner. He doesn't have a choice. He has to be in the boat. This is why the centurion, the one who was holding him captive, if you will, that's why he's calling the shot, right? Paul can't call the shot. But there are some folk in the boat who could have listened to the advice of Paul and not to the owner of the ship or not to the captain of the ship, and would not have had to be in the boat to begin with. I'm parking for a moment. How many young people wind up in jail because they were just in the car with the wrong person? Y'all, we got to be cautious. I want to speak life over my young people. I don't want to see them caught up on a charge just because they happen to have in a vehicle that has some stuff going on that they didn't know about or didn't understand about. And so you got to start hanging with folk that have just as much to lose than you do. One of the biggest mistakes we can make is we associate with people, and if I got all this to lose and yet they don't have anything to lose, and so we got to be careful who I'm in the boat with. I need to start saying, God, and let me tell y'all what this really is. If I had time to unpack this, it's really 273 people in the boat. 3 folk say don't sail. 270 say sail. Sometimes the majority can be wrong. And this is why, as believers, we have to be discerning enough to recognize. How many of my parents can maybe help me out on this Next Gen Sunday when you've had a child come home that want to do something, and the reason they want to do it is because they say everybody's doing it? Have you ever had that experience in your life? And I've learned, first of all, everybody is not doing anything. There might be some folk close to you that's doing it, but everybody's not doing it. And if everybody was doing it, sometimes the majority is wrong. And this is why sometimes we struggle to be who God has called us to be, is because I lack or need this spirit of discernment to be cautious about filtering the advice I'm given. There's some folk that can give me advice on being broke, but I'd much rather get some advice for some folk with some money in their bank account. And I appreciate the advice that, you know, your 3 divorces have given me. But I want to talk to the branches who've been married. How long y'all been married? 33. I want to talk to somebody been married 33 years. And y'all, we've got to recognize, y'all, we've got to be cautious about the advice we take from people. Number one, filter the advice being offered. Just 3 very practical things I want to say. Number 2, the second thing I believe this text is teaching is that we have to learn to fight. Everyone say fight. Fight with every part of us. I think oftentimes in life, can we be honest, y'all? When a storm hits, sometimes we get so emotionally distraught that we stop fighting. And I don't know who I'm talking to, but I want to encourage the house today that whatever may be happening in your life, keep on fighting. Make up in your mind that I'm not going to give it. And I'm not talking about fighting on the surface. I'm talking about fighting with every part of you. And I want to talk about what that looks like. Because if you start looking at the text, we start to see that there are elements, there are progressions of the fighting. Because here it is, y'all. Fighting is a process. And if I can be honest, fighting is a roller coaster. Well, some days I get up and I'm like, man, I don't know if you've ever had this happen in church, but there are moments where I come to church. I'm so excited about the worship. I'm so excited about seeing all of you. I'm so excited about what God is speaking to us that I make up in my mind that I'm going to do something. I'm finally going to go ahead and do the darn thing. I'm finally going to go ahead and do this thing God is calling me to do. And then I get out in it and I find out that it was harder than I thought it was going to be. And that quickly I wound up losing heart and walking away or slowing down. And I'm just here to tell you, you got to make up in your mind that I'm going to fight this thing with everything in me. Maybe I won't make it, but at least my testimony won't be I gave up. Maybe I won't get on the other side of this, but at least my testimony won't be I didn't try with everything in me. And we've got to learn to encourage people that are in the fight, because I tell you what we do. We only celebrate the winners and not the fighters. That's why young people were given a certificate today. Not because everyone is an A student, but because everybody stayed in the fight. And I want to encourage somebody, don't let anybody pull you out of this fight. Keep on trusting and keep on praying and keep on worshiping and keep on giving and keep on serving, and make up in your mind that I'm going to keep fighting with it. I'm not walking away from my church. I'm going to keep fighting. I'm not going to walk away from my husband. I'm going to keep fighting. I'm not going to walk away. I'm going to keep fighting with everything in me. And if you don't win, let it be said, I still fought. Tell somebody, I still fought. I fought the good fight. I kept the faith. There is now stored up for me a crown in a righteous place. Now, let me park here for a moment, because there's layers on this fighting. He makes some early mistakes in the fight. I think the same early mistakes we make in the fight. And the first mistake they make is they start drifting. I read it in the text, y'all. In verse 15 of the text, it starts talking about the wind is blowing so hard that we just gave ourselves over to what the wind was doing. He says, we got in the ship and we were so caught and we could not face the wind that we gave to it. Everybody say gave to it. Watch this. And we're driven along. Which means I wasn't necessarily going in the direction I should have gone, but instead I'm going in the direction that somebody else is driving me to. I want to park here for a moment. Don't you let no person, your mama, your daddy, your husband, or your wife cause you to drift. We don't want to be driven by where other people are taking us. We want to be driven by the direction that God is taking us. And so many times we just let our hands off of it and we stop fighting and we wind up drifting somewhere God doesn't want us to be. I'm learning, y'all. Parents, help me for a moment. I want to speak over us. Let's not try to make our children live in such a way that we then start living vicariously through them. I think so many times we focus more on what we want for them than what God wants for them. And we don't pay attention to how they are naturally gifted. They might be naturally gifted with their hands, and they may not care much about calculus. What we should desire as parents is that you hear the voice of God, that you discern what your gifted is, and you make up in your mind to pursue the thing that God has called you to do. And we've got to make up in our mind, y'all, that we don't have to have other folk driving us. Do you know how many of us get in a storm because we let somebody else drive us? How'd I get here? Because he was driving. How'd I get here? Because I let her drive. No, the first part of the fight is that I've got to be careful what's driving me. I want to park. I ought not want money to be my driver. Money will come and go. But I'm here to tell you, money can't buy you everything you think it can. It can buy you food, but not an appetite. Come on, you got to make up in your mind. It can buy a bed, but not a good night's sleep. So we've got to be cautious about what we let drive us. I'm sorry, the Lord is not letting me move from here. My desire to be in a relationship ought not be driven by the fact that you're in one. My desire to be in leadership ought not be driven because you are. That when we begin fighting, we have to be cautious that we don't drift. And I'm speaking to somebody today that you're further away than you thought. And the reason you're further away is because you just took your hand off of it and you just went in the natural direction. I'm here to tell you, if you're going to be who God has called you to be, you got to fight through this thing. I can't take my hand off it. I've got to fight through it. Y'all, they start drifting. But the other thing in their fighting that happens is they start doing something we all need to do. They start discarding things. Verse 18, he says, we being exceedingly tossed, violently storm-tossed, we began to jettison the cargo. We began, that's the SAT word, young people. We began to throw off. We began to discard some stuff that was in the boat. I don't know who I'm talking to, but I sense God saying to us, it's time to lighten your load. Some of us are sinking, not just because we're in a storm, but we're sinking because the boat has gotten too heavy. And I want to encourage somebody that might be in church today that's in the midst of a heavy boat. I can't be all things to all people. At some point, I've got to let some of this weight go. Is there anybody here along with the pastor that could reflect upon your own life and say, I'm at a point and a season in my life where I've got to lighten my load. And so, yes, I'm going to say no to you because I can't take on more. Yes, I'm going to do less because I can't take on more. No, I can't be all things to all people. I've got to start looking around me and I got to make up in my mind, what can I discard? And I've seen it in our life. God is saying it's time to lighten the load. Now y'all gonna be shocked where I'm headed, because if we're not careful, this is a word for my young people. One of the things that I cannot do is I cannot discard what is most valuable. I told you I grew up in church. I'm so grateful for it. I'm grateful that it stuck with me. Had a lot of painful experiences growing up in church, particularly growing up in the United Methodist Church, dealing with some of the challenges, particularly around race in church. Just very difficult times. But I grew up in church. I grew up in church, and as a result of that, my parents taught me at an early age to value church. And because they taught me at an early age to value church, they gave me a value system so that I recognize when I need to discard something, there are certain elements of my life that are too valuable for me to discard. And so oftentimes I think we get in trouble because we start throwing overboard the things that are essential that got us to where we are to begin with. And I'm here to tell somebody, don't throw away what God used to get you where you are. If God used certain people, if God used the church, if God used prayer, if God used other believers, if God used people's giftedness, don't throw away what God did for you to get you where you are. They began lightening the load, and they started throwing a bunch of stuff. They started throwing cargo over, and then they started throwing tackle over, and then they started throwing food over. Then they started throwing people over. Uh-oh. And I'm not telling you to drown anybody physically, but I am suggesting to you that it might be time to drown some folk emotionally. It might be some time to drown some folk in your social media. It might be some time to silence some of the critics. There are certain things, y'all, we just need to lighten the load. Part of my fighting is lighting the load. Part of my fighting is learning to discard. Let me push to the end of this. But there's a last thing he does in his fighting. And what he finally does is he starts depending. Everybody say depending. He starts depending on God. This blows my mind. They all threw a bunch of stuff all overboard. Then they get to a point where it's total blackness and darkness. It's neither sun nor stars for many days. The wind, can you imagine the feeling? I'm in the middle of a boat, it's rocking and reeling. There's not a star in the sky anywhere. I can't see anyone or anything. I have not eaten for a long time. We don't even know how long of a time. And then in the midst of it, the prisoner in the group, who is Paul, stands up among them and says, you should have listened to me. You should have listened to me. But he says, but check this out. There's an angel that came to see me. And what I'm going to do, and this is such a good word. From this very night, stood before me an angel of God. Now watch this. This is for somebody who needs to get saved and join the church today. It's one thing for an angel to appear to you, but it ain't going to help you if you don't belong to the same God the angel belongs to. He says, an angel of the God of whom I belong and whom I worship. Y'all didn't catch it. He says, this is an angel of the God whom I belong. I'm a member. Y'all. He said, none of this wanting member privileges without member commitment. He said, no, this angel is of the God I belong and of whom I worship. And this angel says to me, don't be afraid. Look at somebody, tell them, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. He says, don't be afraid. You must stand before Caesar. I'm going somewhere, y'all. And he says, I've decided to have faith in God. God. Look at somebody, tell them, be of good cheer. Have faith in God. Come on, tell them, take heart. Have faith in God. I want somebody to get this. When the bottom falls out, have faith in God. There's some of us in this room that can testify. The Lord has never left us. The Lord has never forsaken us. The Lord has never disappointed us. The Lord has never not shown up. That when the bottom falls out of my life, I've got to make sure that I maintain my faith in God. Because watch this, faith is only as good as the object of it. Yeah, this is going to shock y'all. Are y'all ready for this? I got to hurry up. Y'all, a person can have equal amounts of faith in different things. Let me help you for a moment. I can have faith that this podium will not fall, in the same way that I have faith that God won't let me fall. The problem is it's the same level of faith, but it's a different object, which means my faith in God is what sustains me, because the objects come and go. The objects get weak. It's not that I lack faith, it's that I lack faith in the wrong thing. This This is why I need to be saved. Because I'm saying I don't have faith in people. I have faith in God. I have faith in God. I got to have faith that God is going to work out my storm. I got faith. I have faith you're going to be all right. I got faith God going to get you on the other side of this. One last point and we're done. I've got to have an element of fight in me. I got to have that in me. But finally, I have to have the ability to fasten with anchors that have already been proven. Verse 29. In verse 29, they start talking about having to drop 4 anchors. Fearing that we might run on the rocks, they let down 4 anchors. Now, I want you to help me. Let me help you understand something. The anchors we need in our life are anchors that have to already be tested. They can't just be any old kinds of anchors. So what we need to do is we need to take inventory of our anchors. Tell somebody, take inventory. Let me tell you what I mean by that. When the bottom falls out, do you have what you need already in you to help you sustain this moment? Because I'm learning, y'all, calling on God when I get in a crisis is probably a little bit too late. I needed to be calling on him all along. I needed to have a sustaining relationship with him all along. I need to be trusting with him all along. And so there's got to be anchors that ground us, anchors that fasten us. Y'all, that's why we're here. Because I got an anchor. Good Lord, I feel old school church. See, when you've been anchored, storms come, winds blow, sickness hits, but you only go, I might rock from side to side, but I'm not going down because I've been anchored in the Lord. And that's the only thing that will anchor us. Giftedness won't anchor us. Money won't anchor us. Good health won't anchor us. Those will come and go. Our anchoring has to be in God. Because when the storm hits, you got to have an anchor to drop. And the text tells us, see, this is why I'm preaching this. Because I need to learn to rethink church, to understand that just because I'm saved does not mean I am storm exempt. And we have to grow to a level of maturity that when the storm comes, I don't run, I don't tuck tail, I don't give up, but I do what is necessary to be able to sustain the storm. While you in the midst of doing something that matters, somebody you love is going to die. Just when it finally gets good, you're going to lose a job. Just when you finally thought all the answers were there, the money's going to get light. And I'm not wishing anything negative over you. I'm telling you that's what's called life. There's no way to sidestep life. And when that moment happens, I need to have an anchor to drop. And I think too many of us, we don't have an anchor to drop. I got to have an anchor to drop. The text says they dropped 4 anchors. The same 4 anchors we need to drop. And all of those anchors are in God, which is why I need to be saved, which is why I need to be a part of a Bible-believing church, because my only anchoring system is in God. I know your mama's your anchor, but she leaving one day. I know your husband is the anchor, but he's going to leave. Or you going to leave. And I'm not wishing negative over us. I'm just heartbroken over believers who fall apart just because life happens. It's going to happen. The storm is coming. And when it comes, let it be said, I have an anchor. What are the anchors, Pastor? I can't give you all four of them, but the first anchor is the presence of God. In verse 22 of the text, he says, man, look, be of good cheer. There stood by me. Everybody say, stood by me. Oh, God. I feel the Holy Ghost. I got to say this. When you get to a bad moment in your life, God loves you so much that he's going to send somebody to stand by you. And is there anybody that is in church today that could look back over your life and say, man, I would have never made it, but God sent somebody that stood by me, somebody that held my hand, somebody that gave me counsel, somebody that prayed with me. And this is why I need to be a part of a believing community, because God will send a support. Can I say thank you for a moment? Let me say thank you for a moment. I'm blown away by the men and women that show up every single time we have a funeral. They show up, man. They are so thick. They wind up with, it's just, they at the greeting doors, and they're altar counselors, and they're bearing flowers, and they're praying prayers, and they're interceding, and they're reading scripture, and they're singing songs. And I want you to get this. This is ministry for them. And it's not because I'm getting paid. It's because it's ministry. Because when my bottom falls out, I want to be able to look around and see there was somebody in my support system, somebody that was standing by me, somebody that was patting me on my back, somebody that knew they were with me. Yo, tell your neighbor you're not alone. No, you're not alone. That God will send an angel. He'll send somebody to just support you. But it's not just the presence of God. And I need you to hear this. Sometimes when you don't feel God's presence, just see if maybe he sent an angel to stand by you. This is why when God puts somebody on your heart to write them a note, write it. When somebody puts somebody on your heart to say thank you, tell them thank you. When God puts somebody on your heart to send them a message, send the message, because you never know how low people can feel from day to day. I'm going to go ahead and preach this, Kara, because somebody may not want to hear this, but somebody's going to want to hear this. So many times as believers, we want to treat people as if they tripping because they're in a funk and having a bad day. And sometimes along this journey, you just feel low. You just feel like you're not worthy. You just don't feel like looking up. And in that moment, when God puts somebody on your heart, respond to it, and so that they can see there is somebody standing with them and supporting them. As a matter of fact, can that be our homework assignment this week? Who are you standing with? And who are you supporting? And making sure that they know I stand with you and I support you. Because let me tell you what that does for me. That helps you fight when you realize somebody is standing with you and supporting you. Let me close my Bible. Let me say one more thing. I got 3 more, but I'm only going to give you 2, this last one. The other anchor you need is the purpose of God. If you notice in verse 24, let me tell you the reason you're going to survive this storm. He tells him the reason he's going to survive the storm. It's the same reason you're going to survive. He says, don't be afraid, verse 24, Paul. He says, don't be afraid, Paul. You must stand before Caesar. Y'all, they missed it, Trishanda. Don't be afraid. You must stand before Caesar. I can't stand before him if I die in this storm. So what God was doing is he was encouraging him that as long as my purpose for you has not been fulfilled, that ain't no storm that comes along is going to be able to take you out. No devil is going to be able to take you out. No situation is going to be able to take you out. You are immortal until God's purpose is fulfilled in your life. Tell somebody around you, God has a purpose for you. And because God has a purpose for you, you're not going to die today. Because God has a purpose for you, can I give you something to shout about? Find you somebody with a purpose. I'm going to say this side of the room. Find you somebody with a purpose. Why would I find somebody with a purpose, Pastor? I should find somebody with a purpose because if I can connect with you, God is going to keep you alive, which means he's going to keep me alive. Some of us are only here because we've been connected to somebody that God's favor is all over top of. Oh, God. Y'all missed it in the text, y'all. I got to get us out of here. But if you look at the text with me real quick, y'all, he begins to say, look, I got a purpose for you. I got a plan for you. And in verse number 24, he begins saying, because I got a purpose and a plan for you, you got to stand before Caesar. I got a plan for you. You can't die in this storm. You got to get to Caesar. I got a plan for you. You're not going to die of this cancer. I got somewhere for you to go. I got a plan for you. You got to graduate from college because I got something for you to do. But watch this. And behold, everybody say, and behold. And behold, God has granted you all of those who sail with you. Y'all, this is going to make somebody run around this room. God's purpose for one person saved everybody on the ship. They didn't even have to have a purpose. All they had to do is stick with Paul. Look at somebody, tell them, if I were you, I'd stick with me. Come on, tell somebody else, tell them, if I were you, I'd stick with me. Because God has a purpose for my life. For God has a plan for my life. For I know the plans that I have for you. Plans to give you a hope and a future. God has a purpose for you. So Paul, the ship gonna be jacked up. The ship gonna come apart. But you ain't coming apart. And not only are you not, I hear the Holy Ghost speaking. God is saying to somebody in this room, you are not going to come apart. Yeah, he left you, but you're not coming apart. Yeah, the chemotherapy's not working yet, but you're not coming apart. Yeah, you lost a job, but you're not coming apart. I dare you to find two people, give them a virtual high five, and tell them you ain't coming apart. If you're online, type in, I'm not coming apart. You ain't gonna kill me. You ain't gonna make me doubt myself. You ain't gonna make me walk away. I'm not coming apart. Oh, God. I'm done. Look at somebody. Tell them, neighbor, God has a must for you. Y'all missed what I just said. I said, God has a must for you. He got something in your life you must do. He has somewhere you must go. He has somebody you must speak to. He has some issue you must resolve. Look at somebody, tell them, God has a must for you. Oh, oh God. My God. Oh, God. Oh, God. Somebody need to get it in your spirit. Somebody shout, God has a must for me. Come on, somebody shout, I'm going to make it. Come on, type in online, I'm going to be all right. God has a must for me. Tell somebody else he has a must for you. Whew. We serve Jesus. I said, we serve Jesus. I said, we serve Jesus. Have you ever asked yourself why he was able to get up from the grave? Think about the story of Jesus. Think about the story of Jesus. He dies a dark Friday. His condition was not his conclusion. He gets up from the grave, and the reason he gets up early Sunday morning from that cold, dark tomb is because God had a must for him. He had a must for him. God has a must for you. A must for you. If I were you, I'd stick close to somebody with a purpose from God. Have you ever stopped to think the reason your school is still open is because you work there? The reason that job is still there is because you work there. You better stop treating people like they don't matter. When God's people walk in a room, God will sustain the whole environment just because one person. God said, I won't let the building fall in because you in the building. You ever been on a plane with turbulence? People get all nervous and scared. And one thing I never do when I fly is get scared of the turbulence. And some of y'all gonna see this as arrogance, but it's not arrogance. It's just living the text. I never get scared of the turbulence because I have one thing I know for sure. As long as I'm on the plane, the Lord gonna make sure it lands. And the reason he gonna make sure it lands is because I got a must in my life. I got a purpose in my life, and I'm gonna live this thing out until my purpose is fulfilled. And so today I want to speak over your must. What is that must for you? What is that must for you? What is that purpose God has given you? Every person in this room, every person on eCampus, every person has a purpose. So you get saved and you're given a gift because you have a purpose. You get an opportunity to be fellowshipped in with believers because you have a purpose. You endure the storms and the struggles because you have a purpose. You're able to dry weeping eyes because you have a purpose. You're able to not give up and quit because you have a purpose. You have a purpose. If you're believing that today, if you're confident that you have a purpose, I want you to, and if you know what that purpose is, I want you just to stand in the room. If you know what that purpose is, if you're watching online and you know God has a purpose, watch this, watch this. You may not even know the purpose, you just know you have one. I want you to stand. I don't know what it is yet. I'm still trying to figure it out. But I know I've got a purpose. And because of that, I'm overcoming this storm. Lord, in the name of your Son, Jesus, we stand because we have a must. We worship because we have a must. We endure because we have a must. We endure criticism and setback and disappointment because we have a must. God, hardships come, storms come, winds blow. But I keep worshiping, I keep trusting because I have a must. I wind up with disappointments day by day, but I don't lose heart because I have a must. Lord, I speak over our congregation today. I speak over them that we might be a people who overcome storms. Things might get lost, but we're gonna make it. And so I'm praying, God, that we would filter any voice that is not of yours. We would filter, God, making sure that I don't say yes to the wrong advice. I would be cautious about who I rock with and roll with and get on the boat with. God, help us to fight. Help us to fight. Help us to fight. God, help us to fight in such a way, God, that if it means lightening the load, if it means I've got to discard some stuff, God, today I'm beginning that process. God, I sense in my spirit people in the room who are just heavy. The load is heavy. The demands are heavy. And you're saying to us today, daughter, son, it's time to lighten the load. It's time throw some stuff over. It's time to quench some relationships. It's time to just lighten your load. I'm praying, God, that we would fasten our lives with anchors that come from you. Science, we understand, we don't. God, Scientology and knowledge and experiences and exposures and things that come and go. But God, we want our anchor to be in you. My anchor is in you. That anchor is Jesus. And God, as I pray, if there are people in this room, there are people online without a personal relationship with you, without a church home where they're growing and serving, today, God, let it be said that an angel stood beside me of the God to whom I belong and I worship. I'm a member. I belong to this God. He belongs to me. And so, God, I speak encouragement over the house today. I speak fastening over the house today. I speak fighting over the house today. I speak filtering over the house today. I speak, God, an encouragement for someone who's just at the brink of giving up. And they're like, nope, I'm not giving up. I'm going to keep on moving and trusting. Someone's discouraged because the storm, the winds just don't stop. God, there's somebody, God, that recognizes when they reflect on their life. You sent somebody to stand up next to them. You sent somebody who's saying, I stand with you and support you. So, God, I thank you for your word. I pray it would get sealed now good in my heart. Would you bless now, God, those around me?